Hey, what's up? Thank you for tuning in again for another digital art tutorial. In this video, we will be drawing a gemstone. And drawing this gemstone, it is not as difficult as it might seem. I think this video will be about intermediate level. I'm pretty sure that you can do it. So let's get started. First of all, we will make a sketch. And to sketch, I always like to use the chalk pencil brush, but of course, you can use any sketching brush that you like. Now we will focus on this pink gemstone right here. I wanna draw that. I really like the color, so let's look at the shape of it. I'll try to focus at the angles. And well, it doesn't really have a very complicated shape. Try to get the angles just about right, but we don't need to make an exact copy. Let's just try to get the size just about right. Oops, where is it? Where is it? Ah, there it is. Let me just zoom in a little bit more. Oh, I can't. That's okay. And we have these angles here, and we can see that line going diagonal here. And it might look like all these complicated shapes, but let's just focus on the overall shape first and these lines that are clearly visible. There. Let me move it to the center. That looks better. Now my canvas, by the way, it's 3,500 pixels by 3,500 pixels. And now we will get started by adding the base color. Now you know what I'll do? I'll just make a palette. Let's call it Gemstone. And I can just drop the colors in there for you, the colors that I will use. Let's pick something like this first. And I will go and use my smooth lines brush. But you can also use the, let me see, from calligraphy, you can use the monoline brush as well. That also works just fine. And I'm just gonna trace the outline and make it a little bit thicker. I'm just gonna trace that shape, trace that sketch that I've just made. And make sure that your shape is close and fill it. Let me see, yeah. You can clean it up later. Just clear up these steps. Let me call this step 1. I'll group these. There. I'm going to turn off the opacity of the sketch layer a little bit. And then we'll go to this base color layer. I'm going to select Alpha Lock. That way we won't be able to paint outside of the lines. So we can just focus on the inside. I'm going to grab the basic flow brush. I shouldn't forget to drop in those colors, and I'm gonna select a very dark color, and I'm just gonna roughly look at where I see these darkest colors. I'm gonna use a big brush. See a lot of dark colors here. I'm just gonna roughly follow those lines that I see. Those, yeah, should we call them break lines? Here at the top is pretty dark. And I don't really care about following the shapes exactly. I just want to create some variety in color and in darks and lights. Just need a blurry kind of base, which I can start working from later. Let's also use the overlay brush. Oh, oops, I didn't select the color. I'm going to use the overlay brush to add some color variation. And let me use the lighten brush to add some light parts. As you can see, I'm also not too worried about colors. You don't need to get the exact same colors as your reference. I think this is a nice base. Let me call this number 2. And we will go to the next step. Let me turn down the opacity just a little bit more. And right now I'm going to focus even more on those light and dark areas. So let's grab the basic flow brush again. And I want to go even darker than this color, almost black. Put that there. And I look at the reference and I just try to see where those darkest areas are. I'm not worried about edges yet. It can be nice and blurry, like we're making a blurred out version of this gemstone. I'm also not worrying about visible strokes from my brush, just really roughly laying down those darker shapes. And let's do the same with some really light colors. I'm just gonna look at where some light shapes are, like here, that's very bright. And we don't have to use a white yet here. I just wanna lay down a little base for that bright area. But don't go to white yet. I'm gonna build it up slowly. Just want to create a blurred out version of our gemstone. I want to add some nice color variation in there. I think the top can use a little bit more dark colors. Let's see some lines in there. And a very bright edge there. And something like this. Let me see. Let's just see the difference between these two passes that we made. There you can see we have lots more contrast now, but still a very blurry base. Let's turn off the sketch layer and let's move to the smudge tool. Let me just use the basic blender because you all have that. And I'll just blur out these areas because we're making a blurred out version of the crystal. Just roughly going over those areas. We really don't have to worry about details at this point. And just try to look at that crystal and try to and not think about all those sharp edges that I see, that white and those very dark hard edges, but kind of try to see through that and just to see those blurry areas. Like we can see through those sharp edges and just look at that base of the crystal. In a minute we will start focusing on those hard edges and transform this from a blurry looking crystal to a very crisp looking crystal. And right now we want that blurry base. I think this is good. Let's also clean up those edges a little bit. Well, I've got my eraser set to monoline to have a nice sharp edged eraser. And let's just clean that up a little bit. You can just drag and hold your line to make a perfect straight line. That's especially handy for those very long lines. All right, now we'll go to the fourth step and we will add the very sharp, hard-edged lines in the crystal. And that will turn it into a realistic looking crystal, instead of a crystal which you are looking at without your glasses on. There. Name that step 4. And let's get started on those edges. Now first, I will focus on the dark edges and I will use the darken line brush for that. Let me just pick this color. Now, it's a shame I can't zoom in a little bit more. Oh well. And I will just focus on those tiny shapes, and I'm not gonna try and copy them exactly, but I do try to look at the overall shape of the crystal. So lines like this one going down and that bright one here, I want to get those right, but all the small little refractions inside, you can just eyeball that. You can just guess a little bit. As long as it looks a little bit similar, it's fine. And don't zoom in on your piece, well, not too much anyway. Just try to look at it from a slight distance. So just making some random triangular and rectangular shapes, very sharp edges. Because when you look at that crystal and you think about what makes that object, what makes it look like a crystal? Well, that's those bright colors, high contrast, a great difference between those darks and those highlights, and those rectangular shapes. Lots of shapes, lots of refractions. Not sure if that's even what it's called. But lots of rectangular and triangular shapes. That's what's telling you, hey, this is a crystal. So you need to get that in your drawing to make it look believable. Let me just draw a straight line here. This is one of those parts that you want to get right. This is like a hard edge on the crystal. And we've got some shapes over here. Let's get in some of those random shapes. Right up to that edge. Let me just draw a line for this little edge. Might look a little bit too dark now, but we can just paint over that a little bit later. And here, those parts are very dark. So I'm still using the darken line brush to just add some of these random shapes, mostly rectangular and triangular shapes. And still we have alpha lock set turned on. So we can just go over that edge without worrying. Just focusing on the darkest parts of the gemstone. I'm still still working pretty messy. Just roughly laying in those shapes. I'll just make multiple passes of this. First, I'll add these dark shapes, and I'll start working on the light shapes, and then perhaps go back to the dark shapes again. Smudge this a little bit. And make sure that you get some neat lines in there. Some hard-edged, sharp lines. Because that is what you see in a crystal. So to make it look believable, you really need to add that. Let me just grab the basic flow for a minute and add some darkness here. And in between passes, I like to grab the smudge tool and to just look at some areas where I need to soften things up, like this area here. You can see kind of a gradient in there in the picture. So I want to add that. And here at the bottom of the gemstone, we also need a little bit of a gradient. It's quite dark. So sometimes I need to soften some areas up. Now let's move to the bright highlights, and we'll do that by using the lighten line. Now let me just grab this bright pink that I used earlier. And now again, let's make some nice sharp edges like this one here. Adding that one will really add to the realism of this gemstone. Just using the light and line brush. And what the light and line brush really does is lighten things up actually, and it is a brush with which you can use, well, with which you can make pretty hard lines. And I mostly use local colors and light and line or a dark and line brush to either lighten or darken areas up. And I make it bigger and use lighter pressure to just slightly lighten some parts up. And I can use smudge tool to blur it a little bit if it's necessary. So the more pressure you give, the lighter the line will be. Look at that. And that's with slight pressure. It will become bigger and brighter if you apply more pressure. But I usually don't use a lot of pressure at all when painting. But if you do apply a lot of pressure, then you can always just turn down the opacity of brushes to better suit your needs. So again, as you can see, I'm not following the reference exactly, just using it as a guide. You don't have to copy everything exactly. We just want to make a believable looking gemstone. Got a lot of bright highlights in this area. Let's brighten this one up. And just try to stay zoomed out as much as possible. Unless you want to make an art piece that's really big and you want to hang it on your wall, then maybe you want to zoom in to make every little detail look perfect. But here we just want to make a believable looking crystal that's looking good from a distance. Often when I zoom in on my work, it looks pretty messy. But that's okay, I just want a realistic effect from a distance. And we're not finished with the lights yet, but let's just look at it, what this is doing for our gemstone. Here you can see that adding those hard edges already gives it more realistic effect. So let's continue adding more of those lights. Sometimes I go over areas and I think, oh, this area needs a little bit of darkness as well, but I can just go back later and adjust some parts. Let me grab this color now, because I want to make some less bright highlights. I want some pinkish colors. Just for now. gives a nice effect. Let me grab the bright pink again because we have a very bright highlight here. Let's make sure that we get that edge, we get a hard edge. Because if you use very soft edges here, then it won't look like a crystal. Crystals aren't blurry, except for the blurry crystal that we started out making, but that was just the base. If you look at crystals, they always have these very nice, sharp, hard-edged shapes. And adding those, that is what will add to the realism of a crystal like this. You don't have to copy them exactly to make it look realistic. Just make sure that you get these nice sharp edges. Let's look at it from a distance. That's already looking pretty good. Let's use the smudge tool to work on some of these edges here. That doesn't look very tidy yet. Not that it all has to look tidy, but some areas could use a little bit of work. So with these crystals, we have these very sharp edges and very rectangular, angular, triangular shapes, but we also have these nice looking gradients. So that's a combination that's making this look like a crystal. So I'm just smoothing some parts out. There, so pretty quickly we already have a pretty realistic looking crystal. Here, I'm just going to add another step. Let's duplicate this again. So I can share the working file and you can just take a look up close and see what I've done. Let's just remove the sketches here. All right, let me grab the multiply brush. I'm going to use the multiply brush to darken some areas up a little bit, like this here. To darken the multiply brush, it darkens areas up, but it has a soft edge. So it's unlike the darken line brush, which can be used to make dark edges. The multiply brush is very soft. So it's great to darken up these gradients a little bit. Now let me switch to the lighter brush. Let's try using this very bright pink. And I'm going to use that brush to lighten some areas. Just to add some more interest to this gemstone. Let me pick this pink that we used in the beginning. Add just a little bit of glow to our crystal. And we'll also use the overlay brush. I'm going to pick this red. And I'm just going to use it to add some slight color variation. There, let's take a look at the progress. First we had this, then those lines, now some dark areas. Let's continue refining. I want to add some more detail to this upper area. I'll use the light on line brush again, just to add some more shapes. Give it the sense that there's more detail here than there actually is. Grab this local color. There, now to really add to the realism, we are gonna add that drop shadow and also that light that is passing through this gemstone. That will really add to it. So let's make a new layer and drop it beneath the gemstone. And I'll select the basic flow brush and a grayish color. Put it in there. I'm gonna make the brush pretty big. I'm just roughly gonna drop in some shadow. And of course also some of that light. Oops. There. Just roughly dropping some color. So also pick this one, slightly glaze over. I'll just pick those local colors by tapping my finger on the screen and holding it. Let's use some magic and use the Gaussian blur on this layer. And let me just blur that shadow. I'm gonna make a new layer on top. Very bright. And then adjust it a little bit. Add some light here, for example. We can see the light area, that's that light going through that crystal. And some pinks, some more pinks. And maybe a little bit more shadow here. And I can just blur this layer also. So go to Gaussian blur again. To add this. I feel like this shadow here is a little bit too dark, so I'll undo it. I'll drop a little bit of pink on top. Let's take a look now. Okay, I feel like that's better. There, now if we look from a distance, that's what we do, then it really looks like a real gemstone. Let's take a look at the steps again. Let's just lose this reference photo now. And let's take a look at the steps. I need to drop this in the group. There. So first thing we did is make a pretty simple sketch. Move it there. Then we added some base colors, some pinks, reddish colors, and some slight shadows. And then we started making this blurred out version of the crystal. And we already laid down some of those highlights and the darkest areas. And then we started adding those hard edges using the darker line and the lighter line brush. And this already adds so much to the realism of the crystal. And then when we finally also added that drop shadow and that light reflecting through the crystal, that's what really makes it look like a real crystal. Thanks again for watching. I have added the working file, the reference photo, and the color palette to this post so you can take a closer look, use the exact same colors I did, and yeah, just have fun painting your own crystals. Looking forward to seeing your work. Thank you. Have a great day.